Leandria Johnson has always been a name that stirs emotion, sometimes admiration, sometimes controversy, but nothing could prepare the world for what came next. At 42, after years of weathering storms, enduring public judgment, and keeping her truth locked behind closed doors, she's finally breaking her silence. And what she's about to reveal isn't just personal, it could send shockwaves through the entire gospel industry. Leandria Johnson has faced storms that would break most people, battles with addiction, public scandals, raw truths that made church leaders uncomfortable. Yet she never stopped showing up. She sang, she preached, she poured her scars into every word, connecting with people who didn't need perfection. They needed honesty. That rawness made her beloved by many, and perhaps a threat to those who preferred polished images over messy truth. Which is why what happened next sent shockwaves through the gospel world. It all started with one sentence, not whispered in private, but declared boldly for the world to hear. "Please stop preaching." The words came from none other than Keion Henderson, a respected and rapidly rising pastor known for his smooth delivery, tailored suits, and Instagram-perfect ministry. In an instant, the gospel community froze. Why would a man of his stature publicly confront Leandria so directly, so personally? Was it concern? Was it control? Or was there something deeper, a clash between authenticity and image, truth and reputation, scars and spotlight? But here's the shocking part. When Keion said that, the gospel community was divided, not just confused. While some people thought he was attempting to assist her, others thought he was tearing down a fellow minister out of fear or pride. What set this story apart, however, was not just the conflict between two personalities, but also the conflict between two belief systems. Keion embodied the flawless, well-preserved image of ministry order, respectability, and prosperity. From the mess people began to excavate, did Leandria represent something raw, broken, but beautiful ministry? Was their history together this personal, or had Leandria's unrepentant style of preaching now become too uncomfortable for the tidy, orderly world Keion was attempting to create? Rumors began to circulate. Perhaps she had said something in a sermon or had defied a convention too daringly, but nobody really knew until she answered. What's even more bizarre is that she didn't just answer with words, she answered with fire. She responded, "I can't stay silent. I won't stay silent." And all of a sudden, this wasn't a personal jab. Rather, it was about everyone who had ever been urged to calm down, clean up, and act respectable enough to be welcomed. Leandria's message was more powerful than Keion's insult, because she was standing up for all the voices that had ever been silenced by judgment disguised as religion. This is where things got more serious. Instead of just saying she wouldn't stop preaching, she explained why her ministry wasn't for show, but rather her means of healing and surviving. She wasn't looking for praise, but rather to reach people who had reached their lowest point, just like she had. She didn't want to stand above people, she wanted to stand with them, powerful to ignore. But keep in mind that this is just the beginning. The real twist is still to come. The tension was building, and the gospel community was just beginning to take sides. Keion remained silent, but those around them, who supported both leaders, were about to turn this conflict into a storm that no one could stop. Following Leandria's daring retort, social media went crazy, with hashtags trending among churchgoers, gospel lovers, and even those who wouldn't normally follow this kind of drama. Finally, someone had the courage to stand up against the quiet control that had kept people in check for years. Others, who were less supportive, accused her of dividing people and demeaning a man of God. But the truth is that this was no longer just about two people. It had turned into a mirror where everyone had to face themselves. This is where things got interesting, because people began to ask awkward questions like why the church felt so uncomfortable with transparency, why pastors needed to be flawless to be respected, and who got to. For a long time, the church had a single image of a preacher who was always in control and clean-cut. But Leandria was different. She was loud, flawed, and open, which somehow made her more relatable than ever. However, the shocking part is that as the backlash against Leandria grew, some well-known voices in the gospel scene started to speak up. Of course, they didn't name names, but the criticism was harsh. One well-known pastor even stated during a live stream, "Not everyone is called to preach only for the sake of telling a narrative." The tension was no longer subtle, it was public, messy, and growing into something greater than any of them could have imagined. People understood exactly who he meant. On the other hand, Keion Henderson remained silent. No tweet, no post, and his silence became its own headline. People began to interpret it in a variety of ways. Some saw it as strength, while others saw it as guilt. In this case, however, silence felt like fuel to the fire every hour that he didn't reply to people. Both sides had receipts, so they started sharing old videos of Leandrea preaching, crying, and connecting in a way that felt like ministry in its most unadulterated form. Others shared Keion's slick sermons, his fitted suits, his business dealings, and even his celebrity wedding. Some of those stories weren't particularly flattering. Just when you thought the fire was going to go out, Leandrea gave another interview. This time, instead of defending herself, she challenged the system, saying something that made headlines everywhere. The church is scared of real people. That sentence hit like a lightning bolt. And she wasn't talking about Keion anymore. She was talking about an entire institution. She claimed that people were suffering in silence because they felt that they had to hide their flaws just to be accepted. The comparison was brutal, but it revealed something deeper. Her words went from controversial to revolutionary when she stood up for the broken, the addicted, and the ashamed. However, destiny took another unexpected turn when rumors began to circulate that some church leaders were holding private meetings about her. Some claimed she was being banned from gospel events, while others said her upcoming performances were being quietly canceled. If this were true, it meant that her platform had been sacrificed for her truth-telling. But Leandrea didn't bat an eye. She posted a message that read, "God gave me this voice, no man can take it away." The gospel community was suddenly on edge. Was Leandrea going to be silenced once more, or was this the start of a new age in ministry? This time, it wasn't just about public image. After Leandrea's vehement remarks about the church's fear of actual people, things didn't just become tense. They also became dangerous whispers that became warnings. Those close to her started to share that she was getting anonymous messages telling her to stop talking. There was a genuine sense of fear now, but Leandrea didn't back down. Instead, she doubled down. One night, she went live without any glam or filters, just her and her truth. She said something that would rock the gospel world once more. If they can't handle my truth, they're never ready for God's grace. This is where the controversy became a movement. People began revealing their own experiences of addiction, humiliation, and issues they were concealing in order to fit in at their churches, and thousands of spectators filled the live stream with supportive words. It didn't take a genius to figure out who they were talking about at conferences after Leandrea opened the floodgates and people started talking. But as her fanbase grew, so did the pushback from church leadership. A number of powerful pastors started speaking in code from their pulpits, warning against rebellion disguised as revelation. She was once asked to discreetly remove her name from the flyers, and some gospel radio stations even stopped playing her songs. But here's the crazy part. While they were trying to shut her down, her message continued to spread even more quickly. Videos of her preaching, crying, and testifying went viral, and people who had never heard of her before began referring to her as the voice of a new generation of faith. This is where things got even more twisted. As the church was trying to hold its ground, cracks started to show in the other camp as well. People began looking into Keion Henderson's previous interviews, revealing comments he had made about ministry funds and how his image was now being used against him. Screenshots of his previous partnerships, pictures with celebrities, and even rumors about church funds being used for lifestyle choices began to surface. You simply outlast that line, which set social media into a frenzy. Some storms you don't quiet. Nobody knew for sure, but it was obvious that the conflict had changed from being silent to being fought. Was he acknowledging his guilt, dismissing it, or was it a subliminal message that he wasn't going anywhere? Strategic. And remember that there was a more serious problem at the heart of all this drama. People had to choose between two different types of faith: one, where you hide your wounds and pretend to be someone else, and the other where you lead with your wounds and dare to declare, "I'm still called." They weren't just picking between Leandrea and Keion. This incident is unique because it made the gospel community examine itself and wonder, have we been getting it wrong? Has the church placed image above impact? It wasn't just gossip, it was a reckoning. And did we lose sight of the power of truth in our haste to defend titles and platforms? Now that the story's climax was approaching, everyone was waiting to see who would speak next and how much it would cost. After weeks of silence, rumors, and mounting pressure, something unexpected happened, and fate took an unexpected turn. Keion's unexpected turn. Leadership requires accountability, but it also requires wisdom. Sometimes what you don't say protects more than what you do, Henderson said, breaking his silence for the first time, but not in a sermon, an official church statement, or his massive Instagram following. He appeared in a quiet sit-down interview on a podcast that no one expected him to acknowledge, and it was immediately apparent that this wasn't the polished pastor that people were used to. His tone was calm, but his words carried weight. He didn't mention Leandrea by name once, but everyone knew who he was referring to. The internet was split over that sentence alone. Some called it classy, while others said it was a cop-out. What's shocking is that he didn't back down from his call to stop preaching or deny it. Instead, he doubled down, saying that the pulpit was a sacred space and that transparency without discipline leads to chaos. There was no apology or softening, and suddenly, the fire was rekindled while Leandria's fans let her preach without holding back. Hashtags like #real faith still matters trended overnight, and within 24 hours, she responded again, but not through an angry rant or a live video this time. She did it the way she knew best, through music. She released a surprise single, raw, stripped down, just her voice and a piano. The lyrics, they were basically a letter, a cry, a declaration. She sang, "I ain't perfect, but I'm called. I ain't polished, but I'm chosen. I ain't quiet, but I'm heard." People said it was the most emotional track she had ever released, and whether it was intentional or not, it became the anthem for everyone who felt like they didn't fit the mold, but still belong. Suddenly, pastors who once distanced themselves from her started to soften. A few even invited her to speak again publicly. Her tour bookings doubled. Interviews started lining up. The very doors that were slammed shut weeks ago, now wide open. It was as if the controversy didn't break her, it built her. But here's where it got really deep. Some members inside Henderson's own church started to speak up quietly at first, but then more boldly. A few longtime members departed, claiming that the ministry no longer reflected their hearts, while others said they felt more church than before. Internal changes also started to occur, and people began to wonder if influence had taken the place of closeness to God. The argument that began with just two people had escalated into a full-fledged church crisis before the final twist. What started as a single statement, "Please stop preaching," turned into a national conversation about authenticity, control, tradition, and the future of ministry when an anonymous insider leaked a private board meeting recording of one where leaders were discussing how to manage the Leandria situation and control the narrative. This leak was the last straw, and people realized that this wasn't about theology, but rather about control. Therefore, where did this leave everything? It changed the gospel world forever. Leandria stood her ground not because she was perfect, but because she was real. And that authenticity revealed a system that was more concerned with image than influence. Keion Henderson, in the end, it wasn't just about who was right or wrong, it was about something deeper. What kind of church do we want? One that requires mass, or one that permits healing? His followers continued to support him, and his ministry went on, but the perception changed. He was no longer just a voice. He was part of a much larger question. Can you lead without listening? Whether or not Leandria was supported, one thing was certain: she made the world pay attention. This wasn't just a dispute, it was a turning point.